I was living and working in West Africa and the Ivory Coast. And one of my important tasks was to improve the lives of rural women living in the Sahel in the northern part, close to Burkina Faso. And that entailed improving their technology, what we called back in that time intermediate technology, and finding, improving the quality of their products, designing new products, organizing exhibits and demonstrations and fashion shows and sales. And we had quite a bit of success. I hired Peace Corps volunteers to work in the program that was funded by the International Labor Organization, and some from France and Belgium, what they call the coopérants. But one of my main tasks was to improve the lives of rural women in the north that made a tiny income off of spinning cotton. And if they stopped spinning, their children wouldn't learn to spin. So it was like a free school in the villages. So the results of a couple of years of work in that field led to really exciting new products, of which I'm wearing one today. But when I had to write my final paper, I had then discovered that there was something called solar cooking. Now, I didn't know that solar cooking existed. It was something I discovered, and I thought, well, you know, these rural women and men, the one only way to really improve the quality of their lives, no matter how many exhibits we have and how many sales we have of their products, was to improve the fundamental quality of their life by reducing the need to look for firewood, which is the main activity of rural women all over Africa and in many parts of Central America and South America even today. So I was determined to learn how to solar cook myself. I had to find a support group, and when I moved to Washington, I found my co-founder of Solar Household Energy. Raise your hand, Dar Curtis, and I co-founded Solar Household Energy about 20 years ago. And together we invented new cooking methods. We built box cookers, and finally we struggled to find our 501c3. We got that going, and then we struggled to find some funding to make a cooker that was portable, affordable, ergonomic, efficient, which is, someone's going to win tonight back there. And that cooker then had a pilot project in Mexico, which is something I did after testing and after learning a lot about training people in refugee camps in East Africa. Our projects in Mexico were in 6 different states of Mexico, among rural populations that still rely on firewood for cooking. It's hard to imagine, but there's still 1/5 of Mexico's population that uses firewood for cooking food. Now, this particular type of cooker, which is going to be donated tonight, is just one model. There are many different models. And Ronke mentioned that we had a project in Haiti. That was our most recent project. And the cooker we introduced there was a different model because it had to be large enough to cook for a family of 15. And the model there is only really large enough to cook for 5 to 7 people. So at present time, because we just discussed this in a board meeting today, we're introducing parabolic solar cookers in that same region of Haiti because families are large and people want to be able to cook faster. So as I'm assuming this is a very informed audience, but perhaps I should say that photovoltaics produce solar electricity, but they really cannot be used for cooking food. Not yet. We can ask some of the audience members. Albert Nunez can probably add something to this. One of these days we will have solar panels that are powerful enough to be used for cooktops. But presently, solar cookers are solar thermal. They convert the solar energy to solar heat and a heat trap. Now, to learn about solar cooking myself, I started doing it in my own home, which is 3 miles north of the White House. I started cooking on my roof and on my back porch every sunny day from April to October with the cooker that was really designed for the tropics. And it reaches a cooking temperature of like 250 to 270 in this hemisphere. In the tropics, it will get up to 300 plus. So it's hot enough to cook and bake and braise. So this world of solar cooking is like not essential for us because our lives are filled with all sorts of kitchen appliances and we don't have to worry. But what happens when there's a snowstorm and there's a power outage? We all remember the power outage, or I should say, some of us remember the power outage from 2010. Those of us that live in the Washington area. There was a terrible snowstorm. But there's one famous chef in D.C. named Chef Jose Andres, which some of you may have heard of him. He has 5 restaurants in D.C. Well, he lives in Bethesda, and he experienced a power outage in 2010, and he had no power for 3 days. So what did he do as a solution? He happened to have a solar parabolic in his garage, and he pulled that out, and he cooked for his family, and he cooked for his neighbors for 3 days, using up the food that was thawing in his freezer. A good friend of mine who's a pastry chef, do we have those slides? She was a pastry chef, and she too had a cake order during the snowstorm. There we go. She had a cake order during the snowstorm, and she had no alternative except to put the solar cooker out on top of the snowstorm and bake her bundt cake. So these are interesting stories, but we have some real serious problems in today's world. We have these recent earthquakes in Mexico and the power outage in Puerto Rico. How do we prepare? How do we get ready to solve these problems? Since we know unexpected emergencies will continue, preparedness is the key. We have to have the appropriate solar ovens that require no plug in place and trainers in place to be ready for emergencies. We are currently supporting our trainer in Oaxaca, Mexico, to be working with earthquake victims there in preparation for the next problem. So we're very fortunate because we live in a world where we have all these alternatives, but we have to remember that about half the world's population, what are we up to? Over 3 billion people don't have these choices. There are parts of the world where the only solution is using the sun. A lot of the political and a lot of the troubles in the world today that are labeled political or religious are mostly caused by fighting over natural resources, water, and wood. This is what we've heard a lot about, or maybe not heard enough about. We're so obsessed with problems in our own world. So most of these people living 20 degrees north and south of the equator have no clue that they can use the sun to cook most of their meals. My organization is one of many in the world looking to respond to those populations where forest growth can't keep up with population growth. And many of these people experience what we call fuel famine. What does that mean? That means a family living with $1 or $2 a day to buy fuel and food is stretched. Imagine the distress of a mother who is forced to buy food that'll cook fast because she doesn't have enough money to buy fuel for food that will cook slowly, like beans. An average family that's dependent on firewood consumes 1 ton of firewood annually just for cooking. Using a solar cooker in that region around the equator, where the stress is greatest, would reduce that amount of firewood by half. We had a contract. We were contracted by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to begin a pilot project in a refugee camp in Chad, inhabited by over 20,000 refugees from Darfur. And our contract was to test the model we have here on display to see if refugees would accept it, because the cost of trucking and firewood in Chad, where there is not a single tree, was enormous. Well, a small number, 50 women, were trained. The results were very positive, and it was easy to find the right climate there because the temperature is always over 100 degrees every day, and there is not a tree in sight. So the training was challenging. It's very challenging to get people that are used to using firewood to such a new technology. But the response was positive, and the women begged us and pleaded with us to let every woman in the camp have one of the cookers. Now, am I running out of time? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to show that picture of this one. This is what Ronke said, the 3-stone fire, which is a health hazard because of children falling into the fire, and also because of respiratory illnesses from smoke, incomplete combustion. And the picture at the bottom where the ladies look so elegant, that's the refugee camp I'm referring to. You'll see one lady still carrying firewood on her head, surrounded by her sisters saying, "Why are you doing that? Don't you see? Don't you see that we have a simpler way of cooking?" Yeah. So the sun is a natural resource that belongs to all of us. And my goal is to put a sun in every pot. 2 renowned people share my goal. Chef Jose Andes and Amory Levins from the Rocky Mountain Institute. Where is he? Oh, thank you. There. I had the privilege of meeting him and eating a dinner in his home, and we swapped. He gave me his latest book, and I gave him one of our solar ovens. And he's reported to me that he's a happy user. So I hope you will join me, and think about also perhaps learning how to solar cook yourselves. Remember, solar cooking is free, costs nothing. It's an emergency tool, but it's also lots of fun. And the greenest dollar is always the one that you don't spend. Yeah, and I'm just going to end my talk by saying this award is such an honor for me. It's the second award I've received for this work I do. The first was from the Washington Post business section, where I was named the Penny Pincher of the Year. Now, the woman that nominated me, that was Michelle Singletary. Maybe some of you read her column. Yeah, and for many years I was her favorite penny pincher. And she made me report back to her on how much money I saved by solar cooking.